Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 3 of the Have a Less Stressful Marriage in 5 Days challenge. This week so far, look at some of the things we've done already. The first day on Monday, we looked at your worth in God, why understanding how precious you are to Him makes a difference with the stress levels in your life and in your marriage. We also looked yesterday at how we can change the way we think. We saw that both the Bible and science prove that you can change your brain, you can change the way you think and make it more positive and beneficial to your relationship. And today, we're going to look at a way to figure out what we can let go of in order to improve our marriage. We're going to look at setting some priorities. And in the next 2 days, we're going to make a plan to not only implement those changes, but to keep those changes going over the long haul. So let's jump right in with our information about refocusing your attention. There are many different storylines playing themselves out in your marriage today. There are many small stories that focus on different issues in your marriage, and there's one big story designed by God that He intends for you to live out in your marriage. And with so much going on, it's easy to get sidetracked and distracted by the things that flood our lives and make us lose focus on what's really important. And those issues are the things that can end up stressing us out and putting more stress on our marriages. You see, your marriage is one big, glorious picture created by God. He is the designer. He knows what it is and what it is designed to be. And it reminds me of those pictures that are made up of a bunch of littler pictures. We used to get these in the elementary school where I worked. They took a bunch of individual pictures of the kids and put them together, and then with the different shadings, it would display the year that those pictures were taken. And when you looked at it from a far away distance, all you really noticed was the year. If you look at this picture, the main thing you notice is the picture of the dog. But when you get up close, you can see that it's made up of a bunch of individual images, a bunch of individual snapshots that make up the overall picture. And when you pay too much attention to just one particular item, one particular event, one particular image, then you lose the big picture. You can't see the whole thing anymore. And it's a common problem for married couples to focus more closely on the small issues than we do on those overarching theme, those big picture issues that is a marriage based on God's plan. And when those issues are the small ones that make us feel anxious and stressed, makes us feel like our marriage is the problem, or we married the wrong person, or whatever. So you want to think about, what does your big picture look like? If people step back and look at your marriage, what do they see? Or what do you want it to look like? Well, my big picture for my marriage is a picture of me and my husband having raised our kids together and enjoying these empty nest years by serving God together and giving ourselves to one another no matter what happens. But we know that there are a lot of little pictures. We had a lot of little pictures over the last few weeks. We had credit cards stolen, debit card actually, used for $90 worth of gas in Oklahoma. We live in Pennsylvania. It was obviously not us. And it was right after a hotel charged us double. We paid it once through Expedia. They made us pay it again, and now they say they didn't. All these little things can build up. But when I step back and look at the whole picture, it puts perspective on it. Yes, these things are important. Yes, they need to be taken care of. But when I see the big picture of what I want my life to be like, I know that I need to take my focus off of those and put them on the bigger pictures. Because in the long run, all those little pictures are just going to blend together to make the big picture. So when it comes to the big picture of marriage, let's look at what God's picture of marriage is. What did He envision when He instituted marriage back at the beginning, back at creation? Marriage was not designed for us to have all of our needs met by a spouse. Jesus made servanthood a priority when He was on earth. So how much more does serving our spouse. How much more is that just is part of the big picture? And this verse from the book of Mark is when Jesus sat down, he talked to the disciples and he said to them, if anyone would be first, he must be last and servant of all. Mark 9:35. So if we want to be first, if we want to prioritize our marriage, if we want to be, for lack of a better word, important, we need to be a servant of people, and in particular, our spouse. A marriage based on God, the truths of God, will reflect God's image to the world around us. There are so many people looking for more in life, and if we have renewed our marriages, we can show those people God's love. Demonstrating God's love to our spouse and to those around us is another part of the picture. And in Colossians 3:10, it says, having put on the new self, which is being renewed, there's that word again, in knowledge, after the image of its creator. And to put on the new self created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. And that likeness was a servant attitude. So when we think about our spouse, we need to be thinking about how we can serve them. And in a good marriage, they also are hopefully thinking the same thing. But you can't control them, just yourself. Another part of God's big picture is to raise your children to know God. And I remember that once I met my husband and accepted Jesus as my Savior, all I really wanted to do was get married and raise my kids in a Christian family. And it's a big part of the picture that God has for marriage. And it says in Ephesians, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in discipline and instruction of the Lord. So right there, you see that part of his plan is for us to bring our children up to know him. Another part of the big picture is working together. When God said that man and woman would be one flesh, he saw it as two people no longer living separate lives, but being unified in all things, having a spirit of oneness. And in Genesis, he said, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. One person, one goal, one purpose. Another thing God had in store for us with marriage was just companionship, spending time together and enjoying it. We need to set that time aside and be intentional about setting that time aside in order to have these times together. And in the book of Amos, God said, do two walk together unless they have agreed to meet? Are you really walking with your spouse unless you're intentionally designing your time to have time to meet with them and spend time with them? So, what is the big picture of your marriage? And your marriage, my marriage, is a God-ordained vehicle through which I get closer to God and demonstrate his love. My spouse and I grow together through companionship, enjoying one another and raising our children. But what are the small story issues that are making you feel stressed? You need to figure out what is actually bothering you. And what you think is bothering you may not be what is actually bothering you. Sometimes you have to separate the actual event from your emotions. And here's a couple steps to do that. Whenever something is upsetting you with your spouse or anything else, but if something is going on with your spouse, you need to, first of all, identify the objective reality. What actually happened? Just write it down, just like you've been asked by Judge Judy to tell the story. No emotions, no guessing what the other person was feeling or what they knew, just the facts. What would someone see if they watched this happen on video? Then write down your subjective reality. Now you can think about how the event made you feel. Again, don't assume anything on behalf of your spouse. Just write down what thoughts you had and what emotions those thoughts caused. Then you need to do a little sifting. You need to separate the issues, the subjective from the objective. Look at your two lists. Look at the two things you just wrote down and ask yourself, does the action by my spouse truly really mean what I think it means? For example, if your spouse was late, does it really mean that they don't care about your feelings? Or are you just dealing with a deeper issue, perhaps something from your past that makes you feel that way? Then you want to take some time to dig a little deeper and find the real reason you were upset by the events. Are you not taking your spouse's feelings into account? Are you taking things too personally when it's not really how your spouse meant it to be? Were you just sick or tired or hungry or irritable and therefore your emotions were heightened? I'm not saying that your spouse has no responsibility for what happened, but you need to accept your part in your reaction to it. WWJD may be almost cliche nowadays, but it still holds water. How would Jesus have reacted? Would he have reacted in the same way you did to the situation? Then, once you've started to try and identify what really happened, you need to then accept what you can't change. Recognize you can't change your spouse. You can't make them be on time. You can't make them more affectionate. You can't make them think before they speak. So you need to accept them the way they are, just like you expect them to accept you. Then make a plan. Develop a plan of action that's going to help you make the changes you need to make to reduce the stress over these arguments, over these small issues. You can also develop a plan to address the issues that are spoiling the bigger picture for your marriage. So those larger issues you can also create plans for. But you want to make choices here that will create greater peace in your life. You can recognize the issues until the cows come home, but if you don't actually do something that will make a change, the issues will remain. And then pray about your solution. Pray about it to God. Talk to him about it, and not just in a complaining way, but ask for his guidance and his attitude that you should have to resolve the issues. And then talk it out. Tell your spouse what you've learned and what you would like to do about it. Encourage them to be a part of the process. You can also find an accountability partner, a Christian friend, or you can even communicate with me. Just make sure that the person you're talking to is coming from the same biblical perspective about marriage as you have. All right. And today's challenge, in the workbook, it asks you to write a description of what you would like the big picture of your marriage to be. What would you want people to see when they stepped back and they looked at your marriage as opposed to other marriages in the world? That's one step of action. I have 2 of them today. And then I'd like you to try and take something that has happened in your marriage recently or something that causes stress in your marriage that probably doesn't affect the big picture of your marriage. It's just a small part. And pray that God will help you to let them go and focus on what you can do to make that big picture more clear, more attainable. Look at the steps that we went through. Put your emotions and your events through those steps and see if you can find the real reason for these things and take some first steps in making those things not as stressful. Okay, well, tonight, 7 o'clock, we'll be back live on Facebook. Have a little bit more, some more information, some more ideas, some more thought-provoking things that will that apply to what we talked about today. And so I hope to see you then. Until then, have a good day.